Hey, what's going on, YouTube? It's time for the Thursday night Tech Hangout. Let's get this thing off the screen. I wanted to let you know who our guest was, and I want to say a big welcome to Luke. Welcome to the Hangout, Luke. How's it going?
What's up? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Happy to have you. And I got to say, I have been checking out your channel, and we're going to get into that in a minute. And then, halfway through, I want to let everyone know if they join us late who we're talking to. But I was going through my little YouTube crawler where I try to find people who can give you guys information that you'll find helpful, entertaining, anything that's going to benefit you. And I came across this channel called Mac Square. And let me just say that if you want to produce anything with your MacBook or your Mac product, I should say in general, you should absolutely check it out. It's Mac Square. And I'll put a link down in the video description as soon as we finish. We have all kinds of interesting stuff to talk about. Luke and I have been chatting for about 30 minutes. And of course, what happens is I thought that we should hit the record button. That's usually the way it goes.
Definitely.
So let me say hello to the chat real quick. We have Nate, Tech Services. We have Tech for Your Needs, Johnny Chang, of course, Joshua Fitzpatrick. Good to see you. Who else? Carl Letourneau. All right, man, this is going to be a good time. I am going to turn this over to you, Luke, just so you can do a little intro and let people know kind of what the focus of your channel is and what you hope to achieve by producing this content for YouTube.
For sure, yeah. So I got into YouTube just a couple of years ago, just wanted to do some tutorials and then realized along the way that if I wanted to do tutorials, I'd probably have to support other things like PC and other softwares or whatever. So I just kind of niched my channel to doing just Mac products and Apple products. So I focus a lot on tutorials, kind of increasing productivity on iOS devices and Mac. And yeah, I do a lot of tutorials and app reviews as well. So specifically doing stuff for After Effects and Photoshop recently. Those are usually my most popular uploads. But yeah, just increasing productivity and helping you get the most out of your Apple products.
Cool. That is awesome. And, at a point in time, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, I probably would have asked you why Mac, but now it's pretty obvious that Apple is certainly gaining market share. And when it comes to things like multimedia, they've always done a lot of things well, but the main thing to me was always you walk into a store as an uninformed consumer or customer,
right,
and you say, I want this much RAM, this much storage, this much this, and they go, okay, here's the Windows version, and now multiply that dollar amount by 2 and take a look at the, what Apple has. And a lot of people initially just go, yeah, I can't do that based on cost. And that was the main thing there. So we're seeing, quite a transition, certainly in the phone world, which is what we concentrate on, where at one point in time, Apple was kind of the underdog, if you will. They just were a small company who needed a product to save them, and they've produced that product more than once. Obviously credit to Steve Jobs for kind of saving them, a couple times. And even though he has passed on, we are still seeing continued growth from them. And again, I know I keep talking about phones, but that's what we do here. So you'll hear me come back to that quite a bit. Got to ask you right off the top here, what are you using for your telecommunications on a daily basis?
Yeah, I use iPhone 8 Plus right now, so that's what I'm rocking. And pretty much always had an iPhone. I had a flip phone for like a couple weeks, and then I got an iPhone, and that's pretty much what I've been using since.
A flip phone is as in like a Motorola Razr, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. Pretty much as much power as like a toaster and
computing power. Cool. Fair enough. Hey, I've got the 8 Plus myself, so same phone twins here, but question, what made you choose the 8 Plus over the iPhone 10? That's the obvious question.
Yeah, I have never been a huge early adopter. So I kind of like to let things play out and usually jump in around the second or third iteration of the product. So I wanted to kind of see how the iPhone 10 played out. And so I went with the 8 Plus because they came out at pretty much the same time. So I didn't want to give up the button. So I went with the 8 Plus, and I think I'll wait and see what they do with that product and that lineup.
I'm pretty confident that most, if not all, of the technicians in our chat would agree that is the wise thing to do. And we see this every year, and it's certainly not only Apple. It's anytime there's a major form factor change, anytime there's a major software upgrade, we know there's going to be a certain number of problems with it. So, I'm the same way. I like to wait till the 7 look, the iPhone 6 looked good, but let's wait for the 6S or whatever follows that. And when the iPhone 8 came out, it's basically the iPhone 7, 7S for the most part. So I felt a lot safer as a consumer with going, into something like that. Not to mention the fact that one of the things that kind of got me away from Samsung was the OLED display cost, because when you break that screen, you break this screen, you're probably looking at $100 or whatever. I got some notifications. But you break that OLED screen and you're looking at a fairly significant investment to get it repaired. Apple Care is not generally a factor for the people that we see come into our store. So that's kind of, if they got that, they've already gone and done and chosen that route. But when they come in and say, hey, how much does it cost to fix my phone? And it'll blow your mind at how quickly someone who invested $1,000 in this device and hears, what? $300 for a screen? Oh, that's crazy. What a ripoff. What you paid for a lot of that was the screen.
For sure.
It's the OLED technology that you're paying for. So we get to answer that one daily.
I'm sure.
Now, since we're on phones, and again, I want to just kind of stick with this briefly. In your experience, first of all, do you use anything outside of your MacBook? When you start publishing this stuff, do you do anything through the apps on your phone, iPad, anything like that? Or is it mainly on a laptop or an iMac?
Yeah, I just got an iMac a couple months ago. Before that, it was a MacBook. So I do probably 90% of the work on my Macs. And then you can get a lot of the apps to like the YouTube Creator Studio, just to like monitor comments. And I think MailChimp has an app. So usually get everything up so it's like ready to go, and then I'll just kind of monitor it from my iPad or iPhone after it's published. But yeah, majority is Mac.
Okay, cool. And that was the one thing that struck me initially, because what sold me on a MacBook in the first place, and I seriously bought my first MacBook I bought a MacBook Air, I want to say about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And what got my attention first was I saw somebody take one out of a case. Yeah. And I saw the profile on that thing and I go, wait a minute, that's a laptop? That's your laptop? He's like, oh yeah. I go, okay, now I need to see what's going on, because I'll admit I was biased against Apple just based on the cost, and I never dug in far enough to see that their performance is not, a fair comparison if you look at RAM, because of the integration of the system and the software. And I get that now, but at the time, what blew my mind was how thin that thing was. This was before the Windows Surface Pro or anything like that. And I go, wow, it would be cool not to lug around this monster. Yeah. And then, excuse me, having known that my brother was using this MacBook that had a lit up keyboard, I mean, if every computer doesn't have that by now, I don't understand why not. How often do we sit there and not want to turn on a light to be able to see the keys?
I know. Or you're on a plane and you're trying to it's crazy.
Yeah.
I know.
You're in a movie theater,
I know. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because my first laptop, I think I have one of those old iBooks, I think they were called, the really boxy MacBooks. I didn't do anything on it. I think I just browsed the web and stuff. And then I think my next laptop was the MacBook Air. I had the little 11-inch and I ran Final Cut Pro 7 on it, which is probably way too much, way more than it could handle, but I did it.
Well, that was going to be the next big thing for me. So
sorry, I got ahead of you.
No. By all means. This is very casual. And friends, we're going to jump over to the comments in a minute. I want to go over there every 10 or 15 so we can make sure we catch up. So if you have a question and it doesn't get answered immediately and it seems like we missed it, go ahead and type it in there again. I promise you we'll go back and take a look at all the questions and address those. But what I wanted to say was I was surprised going onto your channel that you are, it looks like a lot of your stuff is After Effects and Adobe products rather than Final Cut Pro, which, is what I love. One of the main, if you looked at my app usage on my MacBook, that's what it is. It's Final Cut Pro. I was so blown away, because you buy Windows and you get Windows Movie Maker, right?
Right.
And it's and you can get Sony or something like that. But when I saw Final Cut Pro, my nephew was actually using it and I was like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Give me that. I'm buying this. And as you said, I had a 2011 MacBook Air, and it struggled a bit, but it did it. It got it done. I was like, wow, this is cool. And then, after a more recent update, it kind of started taking hours to render. Right. So I switched over to the MacBook Pro, and I got to say, you get so embedded in the technology. Now I know that so well that it would be a difficult transition to something else.
Yeah.
So as far as your preference for After Effects, what kind of got you to that point?
Yeah, so I started with Final Cut 7. Like when I first learned how to edit, I mean, I've probably done a couple things in iMovie, you know, way back, but the first like, you know, professional software I used was Final Cut 7. And then that was right around the time that Premiere started coming out, like with new updates and stuff. And then they came out with Final Cut 10, and I was so used to Final Cut 7 that I switched over to Premiere because it was so similar. So that's what I knew. And
Okay.
and so I know like it's a huge debate like with Final Cut 10 because there's a lot of stuff with like 4K rendering. You don't have to, you know, export like or cache files and stuff with like you would with Premiere. So I own both, funnily enough, and I've edited, you know, like 10, 15 videos with Final Cut 10, and it's not bad. I think it's just I'm so used to Premiere. It's actually saved me more time just going into Premiere and using that. But in terms of like After Effects stuff and animations, I started with Motion, which is kind of Apple's version of After Effects. And that's really like the most like animation. I mean, it's not super professional. I mean, you can do like some basic stuff with it. I did like kinetic typography was super popular a couple years ago, you know, with quotes and stuff like that. So I would make animations out of that. And then once I like got a little bit better, I moved over to After Effects because After Effects is like a really powerful software. I mean, once you move to that, you can pretty much do anything you need to with that. So that's kind of my story.
Okay, that fair enough. My question would be, would you say that there's a steeper, I would assume that there's a steeper learning curve for something like After Effects.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, because it's so powerful, that means there's going to be a lot to learn. And so I think you kind of definitely want to, if you're just starting out, Motion is a great place to start. And I get a little bit of flack because it's Mac Square and I don't always use Mac products. It's funny, like you mentioned, like I use a lot of Adobe stuff. So I know I should use like Final Cut and Motion, and I have though, like in the past, but I think it just comes down to personal preference as well. Like if you're just starting out, I think like if you're planning on, you know, where you're going to end up, if you're planning on doing a lot of video editing or planning on doing a lot of animations, then start with something like After Effects, because then you won't have to relearn something once you get, you know, kind of max out your learning that you would in like Motion or something. That makes sense.
Right. Totally makes sense. And you know, when you say, okay, I probably should, hey, hold on a second. Unless Apple is sending you a check in the mail,
right,
and you're producing videos for YouTube pretty much for free, you are under you use what you want. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves, I think, and a lot of times you're going to hold yourself to a higher standard, I think, than anyone else will. So that's kind of the thing. But you don't want to disappoint your subscribers for sure. So that's fair. I want to go over here to the chat real quick and make sure that we address all and welcome everyone here. I think we left off right about, let me scroll back here a bit. 1001 Noisy Cameras, good to see you. We have Tech for Your Needs is your first new subscriber that we know of from this stream. Awesome. So congratulations, there you go. Beha, good to see you, man. It has been a while, have not seen you on here for some time. Something I ever wondered why graphics and multimedia editing software is more streamlined for Apple platforms. That was a question from Johnny Chang. Any input on that one?
Sorry, can you say that? I was looking at the chat and I got lost.
Yeah. So he is wondering why graphics and multimedia editing software is more streamlined for Apple platforms. And it's a good question. And my guess is going to be that part of that answer is because you're looking at a manufacturer who produces not only the hardware, but the software, you know, and they're all kind of built to work together, rather than where you take something like Windows and you have to go buy a program that's written for Windows. That's my guess. I mean, I don't know. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like a lot of the Apple products are obviously optimized for Apple product. I mean, Apple's software is optimized for Apple hardware. Like that's why Final Cut performs so well and Motion performs so well compared to Premiere and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it also kind of just depends like what you're into. Like I was saying, like I'm into Premiere, but you can use Adobe stuff like cross-platform, you know, like Windows and I don't know if that answers your question, but I can try and look at it again.
Well, I assume that was what you were getting at, Johnny. I want to make sure that we did. Let's see what else we have here. I see Aoki is trying to get new subs for their iCloud service per Apple Insider. I'm going to look for question marks, guys, because there's a few comments on here, and it's a little tough to to read every single one. Yeah, not sure exactly. Joshua also said, not sure exactly. If you want to restate that, Johnny, there's echo from the feed. If there is, it's probably me because I have no head on. So give a second and turn this down a bit and tell me if it sounds, if you're getting any echo again. Cool. Let's see. John Cassidy, how are you? In Joshua's Linux, I think that was the only, hey, Harvey's here too. How you doing? Hey, Harvey, good to see you. And I wanted to mention, I was going to do this a long time ago, guys. I was going to give you a new tour, but I picked up a real bench for my home because the thing I was working on before was just not big enough. It wasn't really stable enough. And now I have two. There was echo, but now it's fine. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I appreciate this. You know, we really rely on viewers to let us know if we're having image or audio problems, because it's, you know, by the time the stream's over, you go back and go, oh, that looks terrible, or I was echoing or whatever. Okay, so we are good. I think we're somewhat caught up. Again, folks, if you have any questions, go ahead and just post them on there. Again, I might miss something here and there, but we'll try to get to everyone. The other thing I believe that everyone would probably like to hear, at least I certainly would, and it was a question I asked you earlier and kind of brought up, was that if someone came to you, you're obviously an Apple enthusiast, and that's cool, you know, right. You're making good use of their devices. And this is one of the things that often comes up here also, and that is that when we look at things like phones, you know, you get a new computer every, what, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. Right. A lot of us get a phone every year, a new phone every year, right? And there are some extreme people who get one every 6 months. And I'm not going to judge anyone, but I believe that in many cases, people end up with a lot more than they need. You know, they have equipment that does so many things that they don't even, you know, including me. Right. Like, I'm probably looking at something that could do so much more than what I know about, which is why I like channels like yours, because I can go in and go, wow, I didn't even know I could do that yet. My question is, you know, when we look at Mac versus PC, I believe that's what we still call it, right? Or OS X versus Windows, however you like it. If someone asked you, if someone was coming from Windows and asked you why they should go or consider going with Apple, you know, considering the cost differences, what would you call the most convincing reasons, you know, that you could realistically say, look, I understand it's going to cost you more, but here's why I think it's worth that difference in money.
So yeah, I mean, I am a little biased, like you mentioned, because my whole channel is based around Apple products. But I would say for one reason, if you're asking, and a lot of people probably know this, is just the ecosystem. I mean, like if you have an iPhone and you have an iPad and maybe you have a PC and you're thinking about switching to Mac, like that would make a lot of sense, because then, you know, you've got stuff like iMessage and iCloud, all those kind of apps and other services will just naturally integrate. And I think Apple does a great job of synchronizing all that. But then again, if you are like a Windows user, you could also have like Google products, like an Android phone or something, and Google does a great job of syncing stuff as well. So it just goes down to like what other products you have and what ecosystem you want to invest in, I think. And like, I mean, I do definitely have way too many Apple products, because I had a MacBook and then I just got an iMac. I barely use my MacBook now. But then I have an iPad and I have an iPhone. It's just, so that's a lot, but it is all the same ecosystem. So, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Less fragmentation. This is what we hear about quite often, you know, especially when we're talking about Android. You know, you have one Android phone that gets this update, another one gets this update. And I'll say that one of my pet peeves comes from a biased position of being raised on Windows. And if you meet someone who is raised on Mac, you're never going to get them away. We already know how that works. My thing is this: the two cannot play nice together. And that frustrates me when I happen to have half this and half that, and I go, oh, put iTunes on my Windows machine? No, thank you. Right. I need to buy a Mac so that I can run iTunes, because otherwise it's not made to, it works, but it's not good.
And I think it always comes down to like what you're doing. I mean, I think it's funny because a lot of people want to know like one answer or one reason, but there's so many different uses for computers in general. I mean, you could be a musician, you could be a video editor, graphic designer, or developer. So like there's so many different reasons and apps you could be using. Because if you're just an editor, like if all I did was edited on Premiere, then I might actually consider getting a PC, because then you can upgrade different components. You know, you can put a new graphics card in every 6 months. You could upgrade the storage. You could, you know, it's really modular. And so I mean, that's all I was doing. But because I do so much, I'm also invested in Apple's music apps and their, ecosystem for that. So it's tough for me to move away from that, but it always comes down to what you're doing, I think. But
Cool. And I see we've got a guitar and a keyboard in the background.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, keyboards over here. That's just a MPK88, I think, and then that's just a Gretsch Jet Club, and I don't play either of them.
Oh, you know, okay. That was my next question. Are you the musician or someone else?
No, I am. I basically just play drums. The other two are just kind of self-taught. So I have them. It's much more for aesthetics than anything else. But yeah, much more of a drummer.
Okay, well, you got to have that other artistic
Definitely.
Outlet, right?
For sure.
So we did have a question here, and it was, is that a real deer head? I would imagine so. Probably not going to pick that one.
It's paper mache, or it's cardboard actually. So it's like 40 bucks. I don't know if I can. It's like 40 bucks on Amazon, and I got it like the cardboard color, like brown, and then I just painted it black. So
really,
yeah, it was like 40 bucks, and then I just mounted it with those like Velcro plates.
And the one over your other shoulder,
next to it, or over here. Yeah,
in those are. It looks like.
Oh, that's just a reflection of this, I think.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably what people saw.
So, surprised. I'm going, yeah, gotta be a real deer head. No, it is not. Yeah, so there you have it. And Tech for Your Needs had a question here also for you. What is the one thing you learned so far? Okay, what is the one? I would assume what is the most important thing probably. What is the one thing you learned so far by being a YouTuber?
Man,
anything that sticks out?
That's a great question. This kind of goes back to our conversation we were having earlier. I mean, being a YouTuber is a lot of commitment, I think. And I think at the end of the day, if you're trying to stand out, which most people are, I mean, it's got to take a lot of work. And like I was saying, I mean, you never stop being a YouTuber. Like I was saying, like at 1 a.m., you're looking up like the new algorithm changes, or you wake up first thing in the morning, you want to see how many views you got and like how you can respond to comments and engage. But it always boils down to hard work. I think it's just, it's how much you're willing to put in. And if it's just a hobby, that's totally cool. And it's funny because I can't even say that like just it being a hobby won't get you anywhere, because there's people who aren't doing all the strategies that probably you and I are doing, and they have, millions of subscribers. So it's a changing environment. But I think if you engage with the community and you build like a really solid fan base and community around you, then you'll definitely go far and appreciate it.
So fair to say that one of the things you learn by being a YouTuber is it's not easy for most of us.
For sure.
Yeah. Before the stream, Tech, we were talking about how once you produce your video and you upload it to YouTube and it renders and it's live and it's ready to go, that's when you go to work on that video. Right. Like that's where a lot of the work comes in after the publishing. Obviously it takes some time to edit everything together, to do your voiceover.
Right.
But once you publish the video, you've got to add links, you've got to do keyword research, you've got to create your thumbnail. If you're doing a podcast, you need to extract the audio and edit that. You've got to promote. I mean, there's a lot more. Like, it's really surprising. I'm not complaining by any means.
Right.
If I could do this and make a living from it, I absolutely would. But it's certainly more work than I expected. I mean, that's a very good answer. There was one more other thing maybe here. Let's see, where do we go? Hackintosh, being a public personality on YouTube is all about living your life the way you like it, being original, and don't pretend to be something you aren't naturally. I would agree. That was another thing we talked about, Johnny, was that there are, as Luke mentioned, there are some people who got famous on YouTube fast. A lot of them started out way back, when we wish we would have done earlier, because if you published anything back in the, mid 2000s or whenever YouTube launched, if you just stayed consistent from then till now, I'm confident that you would have, 1 million subscribers, right? But nobody really, I think, understood how this was going to blow up. But if you look at some of the older channels and some of the like rock stars of YouTube, and you go, I can do what they're doing, that's very misleading, because what they're doing is starting 10 years ago. So it's hard to compare ourselves, to a lot of people like that. And but your point, Johnny, is fair, because Luke and I kind of talked about how you have these very high production channels. If you look at, I'm going blank right now, but if you look at something like, oh gosh, like I want to say ZDNet or BuzzFeed or any, you know, one of these big publishing companies that has 20, 30 employees and super high production value, and it looks like a Hollywood movie. That's cool for their niche, but I agree 100% with what you're saying, Johnny. We're just real people doing our thing, and this is what you know. What you see is what you get. There's no fancy smoke and mirrors going on here, and I personally prefer to watch a channel where I feel like the person that's on the channel is relatable. You know, they're not like up here and I'm down here. We're just two people, and I enjoy what they're doing, and I'm subscribing, and you know, that's how I look at it. So I like that you made that comment. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. We had another one here that was interesting, and this is a phenomena that comes up, you know, in conversation quite often. We got some stats on it more recently because we kind of saw this happening, but nobody really could put a number on it. And that is 78%, according to a survey. I should always say that, allegedly, according to a survey, 78% of American high schoolers own iPhones. 82% plan on their next phone to be an iPhone. So whether they own one or not, their next one's going to be an iPhone, if you know they can make that happen. We don't even have to discuss who's paying for it. We probably have a good idea about that. What do you see as being the biggest factor in that choice? You know, because you're a little closer to high school years than I am.
Sure.
If you can think back to that time before college and say, what would make me decide to buy something? Or if you looked at your peers, rather, I shouldn't be just you, but if you looked at your peers and people around you, what motivates them to choose a particular brand or product in your mind?
You know, I think marketing has a great place in that, like, just because iPhone was one of the first smartphones, really. I mean, that went widespread at least. And so it's kind of been there ever since. It's always held a kind of special place in the market. A lot of people will compare the new smartphone to an iPhone, you know, and the other side of it is probably just like whatever their family owns or what their friends own. So, you know, if they see a lot of iPhones, but that's a crazy statistic I hadn't heard about. I mean, that 80% is insane. And for both, I mean, 80% planning for other phones as well. But it also goes back to like the whole ecosystem thing as well. Like a lot of people have Macs, and so if they have a Mac, they want iMessage and stuff on that. I know from my friends in high school, that was a huge thing. And even just like creating group chats, you know, like an iMessage, and then like one person doesn't have an iPhone, it like gets all messed up and stuff like that. So little things like that will, you know, kind of add up and push someone to go with the Apple route.
Apparently that's a big deal. You know, if someone messages you and they don't have that little blue bubble on their phone, then they're not part of the clique, you know, not cool enough to hang out.
I know. It's frustrating for sure. I mean,
What's
like
that?
I said, it's frustrating for sure. I mean, like if anytime like somehow anytime that person who doesn't have an iPhone responds, it starts like a new thread with just the people that were like that had read the text, and then it like starts a new thread every time they reply. It gets really complicated. So it's messy, but
I'll say this, you know, and I'll say good and bad things about every company out there. One thing about Apple, they've got it figured out, you know, between marketing and creating the desire for their product, you know, and by no means do I call anyone perfect. They all can improve for sure. But when it comes to the marketing, I agree with you 100%. I'm thinking back right now to around 2000-ish, which, you know, long time ago, right? But I remember Apple making I believe it was their first iPod commercial, where they had featured like a Green Day song, and they had like the silhouette images dancing around. And that still to this day sticks out in my mind. Like, I don't remember any other MP3 player. You know, I remember Napster, and I remember, you know, that whole revolution. But when you saw that commercial, that made me say, wait a minute, what is an iPod? What is this thing? You know, people are dancing around, they got their headphones on, they're playing pop, you know, what was very popular music back then. And certainly when we think about that old commercial with the Windows versus Mac, I don't know if you've seen that. It's pretty old, but it's like a guy in a, you know, really stiff looking suit going, I'm a PC. And then you got the casual guy going, I'm a Mac, you know, and clearly communicating that, you know, Apple was the stylish, trendy, hip kind of thing to do, and Microsoft was for old people, you know, and for professionals that were, you know, had boring jobs. So I'll give them credit, man. They've handled that marketing well. And when we look at kids in their teens, especially high school years, we know how important, how influential peer pressure is. If you're the one odd kid who doesn't have the same shoe brand, hat, bet whatever it is going to be, you're practically an outcast. And of course, they go back home to their parents. Now, I feel bad for the kid who can't afford to get, the family can't get an Apple product. So now suddenly you're an outcast, and I'm sure there's all sorts of, oh, you guys can't afford to get $1,000 phone or whatever it is. And that part of it's sad. But another thing that happened a long time ago, and you probably know this history better than I do, but Apple made deals with a lot of elementary schools back in like the 80s, mid 80s, and they started getting Macs into all these schools. Anyone who was a teacher, anyone who was a kid back then, which we're looking at, the people who are buying devices for their kids now, and it's the same recognizable brand name. So it's not as tough of a sell as some new product. I think the only thing that could really hurt Apple right now is if they somehow, if in some way it became not cool for kids to have iPhones anymore. That, of all the other things that could affect their stock value and the company's cash flow and everything else, that would be the killer, and it would be a slow transition. But if suddenly school kids started going, you know what, iPhones suck, and they started moving over to something else, that would be a slow death for Apple. But it would certainly, and they're smart, they know this, they're tuned into the future for the most part.
Definitely. So, I think just going back to what you're saying, like I think a lot of that is peer pressure and stuff, but you never have to have the latest and greatest. I mean, you don't have to have an iPhone to, take good pictures or, send cool texts or whatever. I mean, like, you don't have to have a Mac to make good videos or, 4 monitors. You can get started with anything. Just like, it doesn't have to be good. We were even saying like, just getting quantity out there is more important than quality. Just making stuff.
Oh yeah, when we're talking, good point. Thank you for getting me back on topic here. Yeah, that's the thing. When a lot of people say, start to ask about YouTube, and there's a few people that are curious about, starting a channel and what makes a channel succeed. And I wanted to add something to that point that we talked about earlier about being a YouTuber. And one of the things that I certainly learned about this, and that is, let me make sure I got your page ready here so we can go back to that in a second. That is this. One, we know that YouTube is far more competitive than it ever has been, and it will become more competitive in the future unless they do something goofy and start, demonetizing, 90% of the publishers. But the other thing is that it is particularly competitive in the tech category. So, we all look around and say, tech is cool. I love tech. I love this about it. Phones are a big deal. Guess what? So are hundreds of thousands of other people. So that's a very difficult category to start off in my opinion right now. And if you do, you certainly want to choose and this is advice that I got from the techie guy who I had on a couple of weeks ago. He kind of put it into words for me, but it made so much sense. You want to pick a niche specific category and focus on that. Okay, we have Luke from Mac Square who does productivity for multimedia with Mac products. Because if you said, hey, I'm going to review computers, well, guess what? That you're not going to be known as the guy who reviews computers. There's already someone out there doing that. If I want to be the guy that reviews phones, guess what? Marcus Brownlee has been doing it for so long and so well and dominates the category so much that I will probably never have 10% of the subs that he does. But if I can find something, or you find something that you do different than everyone else, and you know the topic well, and you can say, this is exactly what I do, just this, I think your chances of succeeding are far greater than just going, I'm going to do tech stuff. That's a tough one, right?
And another aspect of that too also comes down to personality. I mean, just going back to that other question, like people are going to subscribe to a personality too. Like you can, even if you are just talking about tech or in that specific niche, they're also coming to you just to, hear your opinion and to just connect with you and talk to you in a way. I mean, like, it sounds funny, but like you can be friends with people just online through video like this. I mean, never meet them in person, but you always trust their opinion and go to them. So if you can be that natural personality as well, like those two hand in hand are pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, we're building a virtual world, right? So like the internet, you will have a community of friends. I mean, I have so many cool people that come onto my channel for whatever reason, is sit here and listen to me talk. But I love the fact that they come back and we have conversations and they ask questions and we get to talk a little bit and from the privacy of my own home. You know, how cool is that? 20 years ago, never would have imagined.
I know, it's crazy.
Hey, everybody, I want to remind you and let anyone who might be joining us a little late know that today we are talking to Luke from Mac Square, and he does have a website underway, getting there right now. It's macsq.com. It is not Mac Square. So just to differentiate that, this is his YouTube channel. He has got all sorts of cool stuff. If you're interested in learning about making neon objects in After Effects, what else do we have? Social media artwork template that just took off. I can see people were loving that. Glitch and title effects pack. I mean, there is all sorts of stuff here on this channel. And one thing again, and I should probably mention this, if you're making a YouTube channel, make some playlists. You got to categorize this stuff, because what often happens is someone visits a channel and they see this, you know, they go to the home of the channel and they go, okay, this guy's got a little intro thing here, and then he has 3 videos that I might not particularly be interested in. And that will say, well, wait a minute, well, what are these playlists about here? And suddenly, oh, I am totally interested in this category or this category. So if you make those playlists, I believe that you will experience more success than if you don't. And I would recommend you check out Luke's channel and subscribe, of course. That's what we're all here for, right? And to pick his brain if you have any questions about the things that he does on his channel. Hey, Leron's with us. What do you know? And I am quoting Leron, and he's actually in the chat. Awesome. Leron, I want to say that we've done a couple of live streams, which is like the reason I never want to call this a one-off. You know, I envision at least a 1-year anniversary live stream again, but it never has to be that long in the future. Leron and I did a promotion where we did a giveaway for a home system, and he's the one that gave me that advice. Leron, you've given me some other good advice in the meantime, and that is be as niche specific as possible. 100%. I could not agree more. Let's see, let's see if we got anything here. The best niche I have seen is the lawn care guy who only does products for lawn care. Okay, now
there you go.
You never think of that, right?
Man.
But you can just imagine the lack of competition in that category. Like if you are halfway decent at lawn care and you made a channel, and I know to a lot of us that may not sound exciting, but if 100,000 subscribers sounds exciting, then you probably want to consider, you know, knowing your audience and selling to your audience and having a product that is exclusive to you for the most part. And sooner you do it, the better, right? Because you establish yourself as first nowadays, and that is a big deal for whatever reason. Not all, and you don't even have to be the best. You just have to be first. So great advice there from Leron. Your community is no longer in your neighborhood. That is so true. Luke, what are those earbuds you're wearing?
Yeah, these are actually custom in-ear monitors because I play on stage a lot. They're called Alien Ears. This is upside down, but you probably can't see this. Yeah, Alien Ears. They're just custom molded triple drivers. Wouldn't recommend this brand. They haven't lasted too much, but Ultimate Ears or 1964 is great. But yeah, they're just custom ears. So
when you say custom molded, is that a thing where they put something in your ear first to make a cast and then they produce the headphones for you?
Yeah, so I actually did it at home. So I just had like one of my siblings do it for me. You just like do it in each ear and then you kind of seal them up and send them off. And then they take like a month or so to get it to you. But yeah, it just helps to seal out like outside noise as well, especially on stage. And because I'm a drummer, it's super loud, you know, in the drum cage. So really
excuse me. Yeah. When I was in the DJ business, we had something similar. They call them actuators. You know, they didn't have any lives. There were no wires attached.
Sure.
But you go do a mold, you put them in your ears. They create this thing, and it was custom made for your ears only. And the awesome thing was you put them on, and they're not like earplugs where you get that muffled sound coming through.
Right.
And I'm sure as a musician, that's the main benefit is you can still hear the sound. It's just turned down a little bit.
Yeah. For sure.
So that's cool.
It definitely does a great job. And these are triple drivers as well. So it does a pretty good job of producing good bass and replicating that for drum stuff. But yeah,
awesome.
That's what I use.
I love it. Okay, so I'm going to throw a curveball here.
Sure.
Because Johnny Chang always comes up with interesting stuff for the stream. And he sent me this beforehand, and I don't know the first thing about it, but let's just talk briefly about CryptoKitties. I don't know what this is. Okay, so I'm seriously on their website. It's called cryptokitties.co. This is not a promotion for them. I am not affiliated in any way whatsoever. I'm not a financial advisor, blah, blah, blah. But what is this? These are digital cats. I assume something like those Digimon things or something, but they're not. They're virtual pets. And apparently they are made, like they release one every 15 minutes. They're hoping this will be like the new Beanie Babies thing. And it is a game centered around breedable collectibles and oh, so adorable creature. Look, I sound like I'm doing a commercial for these guys. I seriously don't know anything about this except from what I've read here. They're unique. Apparently each cat is different, can't be taken away or destroyed. And it is built on blockchain technology, which we've been hearing all sorts of stuff about lately. And that's kind of what cryptocurrencies, the way the cryptocurrencies and other type of pretty much the security, the future of security, it looks like, is going to be based on blockchain technology. So it is, if I understand correctly, a series of algorithms that makes a unique key that depends on different sources to verify, blah, blah. You know, I know it's getting crazy, but these guys are hoping that you will buy a crypto kitty or create one or something, and that they'll appreciate in value. Any thoughts on that one?
Okay, I have to just ask a question. Is this what you asked me before we started the live? Okay, yes. I thought you asked me about cryptocurrency or crypto kitties.
Oh, no.
I
misheard you. Kitties.
Crypto kitties, that's a whole different thing. This is amazing though. I saw someone wanted me to make one. That's great. I'll definitely try that out. This is cool though. I think I'm always down for trying new things. What's kind of annoys me about these products is they're gonna get super popular in like a couple weeks or months, and it's just gonna be like the new thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like
yes, absolutely. Because what did we? Have you seen those little dolls that they're making now? I'm gonna go the Pop series stuff.
Yeah.
They're called something Pop. I walked into my. Sorry, I think I lost your audio there.
Oh, sorry. I just saying I think I forgot the name, but I know what you're talking about. Like
yeah, it's a doll Pop or something like that. Mm-hmm. I go into my brother's store the other day, and he's got the entire Pulp Fiction cast in these little dolls. They've got South Park characters. They've got everything you can imagine in these little dolls. Crazy. And another thing that blew me away is that back in the 70s, they had this series of cereals. They had these cereals called Frankenberries, Boo Berries, Count Chocula. You might have heard of them.
Like in the 80s or in the 90s, kind of.
So when we were kids, way back in the 1900s, my brother and I were familiar with these cereal brands. They came out with a Boo Berry action figure thing, is all I could call it, right? So I go, okay, this is cool. This is going to bring back memories. For Christmas, I got it as a gag. It was like 30, 40 bucks or something like that on, I think it was thinkgeek.com or something. Mm-hmm. About a year and a half, 2.5 years later, he sends me an image of a finalized sale on eBay where these things are going for like 900 bucks.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, Funko Pop. Thank you, Noisy Cameras. That was one of the one that I was thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah, so and I go, well, are you going to sell it or what? And he goes, well, I don't know. Is it going to go up more? And that's the situation that we end up in. You don't want to get stuck with a bunch of Beanie Babies, right? I mean, I don't know if those are worth anything now or not.
Well, they're like vintage now. You have to like spend tons of money, I think. It's like those and like N64 games, like N64. Yeah. Like early 2000s, late 90s. They're like super popular and expensive now because it's like, it's all coming back. It's crazy.
Well, I just got something in my feed, I think day before yesterday, about all of these classic Apple products making a comeback. So if you have an original Nano, or you've got an iPod Classic with a hard drive, and the better condition, the more valuable, obviously, and people are starting to snatch these up because there's only so many out there. And, you buy one and you've got one of the last remaining, or, obviously if you have the first generation iPhone or the first generation Apple, anything for the most part, we know that they're going to appreciate in value. They've even recently, apparently they've recently minted a coin with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, you know, those little collectible gold coin things. And I believe it's in celebration of the North Korean summit, which has now been canceled. And people are saying, if you have one of these, hold on to it. Wow. Because, you know, no matter how you feel about either of those parties, it's going to be a rare thing to own at some point. And remember this, you know, from 20 years ago or whatever. But it's so hard to predict which things are going to take off and which ones won't.
I know. It's like, it's one thing to create a niche. It's another to create a niche for like 15 years down the road or 30 years down the road.
Right. Let's see. The iPhone even has its own emoji.
Wow, that's awesome.
Are you getting some camera issues there?
Yeah, looks good for me. I don't know if you're...
I think it might be me because my lights just kind of dimmed a second ago and came back up. Hopefully we can hang in here for another 14 minutes. The downside of cryptocurrency is that to register each transaction, there is a huge energy penalty involved. For a transaction, I thought that was just for mining Bitcoins. Am I wrong about that?
Are you asking me or just asking?
I'm asking anyone who has an answer. I certainly am not an expert on cryptos. I've been experimenting with them, not very successfully. So I'm pretty much just lay back with a small amount of money and have fun and don't worry if I win or lose. Sure. And I was doing well for a while. You know, I had a consistent method of earning about 5 to 10% on my investment daily by day trading. And then the market has been far less bullish recently, and everything that I bought just tended to die. So yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I have a funny story about cryptocurrency. My brother hired he owned like a video production web development company a couple years ago, and so obviously older than me, but he hired a developer, and you know, Bitcoin was just coming out then, or just like coming back, I guess. Like this was 5 or so years ago, and he asked my brother to pay him in Bitcoin. And so, you know, you have to like, I think deposit a minimum amount or something back then. So he had to like pay him and convert some over. So he had some extra just like sitting in his account, totally forgot about it. And he came back like a couple of weeks ago. He had like an extra $2,000. I think he paid like $800 then. And he like came out, had like an extra $2,000 or $3,000 just like sitting in his account because it like just spiked and he'd forgotten about it. It like definitely want to take it out. But yeah, I know it's hard to keep up with. It's changing so fast.
Well, when you hear about these guys that have, you know, bought $100 worth of crypto back, you know, 10 years ago, and they're like millionaires.
I know.
And last fall, when everything went through the roof, I'm going, okay, you're a millionaire on paper. Get some of that paper out now.
Definitely.
And, you know, keep some of it in there, but get some of it out now because
just in case.
Drop back down to where it was and look what happened.
I know. Can't ever predict it.
Craziness. Luke, if you can't use Photoshop, what would you recommend?
Ooh, good question. Probably like a week ago, I would have told you Pixelmator. But I don't know if you've heard of a YouTube channel called Roberto Blake. He just did a video on, he was like, I think he called it like the best free Photoshop alternative that you've never heard of. And it's basically like a web app. And I didn't spend too much time in it, but it looked almost exactly like Photoshop, looked like you could do most of the functions. It is a web app, but I would check Roberto Blake out. It's one of his most recent videos. But then Pixelmator is, I think it's like $70 or $80. It can do a lot. It's what I got started with. So.
Okay, cool. Good info. There was a website, and I'm going to go blank on the name, but it was a membership deal also. It was Photo Bubble or something like that. And they went out of business, but you know, it was, I don't know, $5 a month. You upload a photo and you do all kinds of effects. And it was kind of like pre-made templates that made it easy for someone who didn't, you know, study. And for whatever reason, they went offline. Guys, let me know if I get an echo back. I relocated my speaker because I was having a little trouble hearing. I was going to ask, my recommendation or my go-to has been GIMP for the most part. Are you familiar?
Yeah, I haven't messed around with it too much. I've heard of it. I know it's pretty popular, but yeah, there's tons of great ones out there. I know GIMP does a pretty good job. It does a lot of 3D stuff, I think, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Or
I'm certainly not an expert on it, but I can tell you this. People have mentioned to me that using Photoshop or, you know, Adobe products in general tends to take a little studying, you know, like almost go to college to learn how to use it. And I got to tell you, GIMP is awesome when you figure it out. but it is far from
Learning
intuitive
curve.
in my experience. And every time I want to do something, I have to look up a tutorial. And, you know, again, just not intuitive, like the way you go, oh, that should be here. It's not,
Right.
you know,
I know.
no, it's not. You have to open up this thing and do this and get a plugin to do, and it's just like,
It's pretty
so I
cool.
keep it simple. I'm certainly not an expert.
I would say though, like if you are just getting started with an app like Photoshop or something more complex and you have no idea how to use it, definitely watch tutorials. And like 4 or 5 years ago, like just around the time I was starting my channel, I like was just watching tutorials and how to, like on YouTube, just like how to use Photoshop. And there was a channel called Northern Tech. There was a guy like around my age, or around my age now back then. And he was doing tutorials on Pixelmator, and that's how I learned, and ultimately how I started my channel. But yeah, but like just watch tutorials, and that's the best way to learn almost anything, I'd say. But
How cool is it, you know, that now, and it's obviously, you know, you do tutorials,
yeah,
I do tutorials, and
so,
anytime I have a question, rather than trying to read some text or what, hey, go to YouTube, and if there's
right.
somebody doing it, and you can tell by the ratings and where it ranks, you know, pretty much how reliable it is. You watch the first 10 seconds, you can tell from the production quality if it's going to be legit or just somebody
Right.
trying to get views or whatever. And man, the amount of information that we have available to us, you know, not just through the World Wide Web, but YouTube specifically, where they show you, you know, you don't even have to speak the same language on a lot of this stuff to understand it.
I know, it's crazy. And one thing I'd like to do, and I've seen a lot of channels do, is just they include like the project file too that they've worked on. So like if you don't understand it, you can like download their file and kind of reverse engineer like how they built something. And that's always super helpful. Like, you know, I mean, there's just so many tutorials and channels out there. It's so helpful.
It's almost, I have to discipline myself, you know that YouTube rabbit hole where you go looking for one thing, and then Google has got so good with their suggestions, you know, with exception, that it's like, oh, now I got to watch this too. Now I got, oh, well, why didn't I click on this one in the first place? And next thing you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm watching some really weird video, and I'm like, how did I get here? You know, it's that Kevin Bacon thing. It's like I started looking for how to fix a phone, and now I'm watching a video about car accidents.
Like, so much had to happen for me to get into this situation.
It's nuts, man. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. How are they looking at what I do and saying, oh, you should watch this thing about telephone poles? What?
I know.
Let's see. Turn off autoplay. It feeds the binge. That's a good point, noisy cameras. And, you know, it's a tough one, though. It's like a love-hate, because a lot of times I get suggestions where I go, this is great. This is exactly what I want to see. But there's certainly a high noise to, what do you call it? Signal to noise ratio is not good. A lot of times I just get garbage, but what are you going to do? It's hard to complain in a first world. Let's see, did we miss anything here real quick? The blockchain have to be padded, each and every one of the copies floating around with the most recent version of the transaction ledge. It's unlike cascading a stream of changes. Okay, I am gonna leave that one alone, Johnny, because eventually we're gonna have a crypto expert on here. I can't answer most of these questions.
Me neither, sorry.
What we can talk about is this. Let me get this up on the screen, because this is one of the things that we often get to deal with, and I want an opinion from someone who doesn't do this for a living. Now, you're aware of the battery fiasco with Apple.
Right.
And I preface this always by saying, guys, I don't have anything against any one particular brand. I just want to hold everyone accountable to make sure that consumers get what they deserve for their money, because we work hard for it. Apple is offering a $50 rebate for full price battery swaps. If you didn't know about this already and you bought a battery for your iPhone 6 or later from January 1st to December, so basically throughout all of 2017, Apple is going to reimburse customers for the battery that they had to buy because of the whole throttling issue. We're all pretty familiar with that. So there was a software built in to the phones, which was arguably misleading to customers because people thought that their phone was outdated because it wasn't running at full speed, when in fact Apple had intentionally slowed down the processing speed in order to preserve the battery so the phone would last longer. And this is one of the problems that we see with self-enclosed products. You know, back in the day, you could pop your battery out, throw a new one in, you're good to go. And then it got to the point where, well, now you have to take your phone to a store to have them take the battery out and put it back in. And now we're at the point where the first question every customer has is, if you replace my battery, is my phone still waterproof? And we have to say it was never waterproof.
Yeah, never
but
was.
When we talk about water resistance, let's put that into perspective. So any feelings on this thing? You know, Apple, I'll tell you up front, my thought is that yes, this is a good move. I believe that they should have replaced these battery. And I know it's easy for me to sit back here and say, I think this is what this big corporation should do. But when you multiply $50 times the number of affected phones,
thousands, millions,
we're talking about a lot of money, right? So I am impressed. I am actually, I'm really surprised and impressed that Apple is saying, yeah, you know what, we're going to credit you back. Certainly, public relations is a concern. We want people to like Apple because we want them to keep buying the product. Were you affected by this? Do you have an opinion on this type of procedure or move by Apple?
Yeah, I think one of the side effects of that was that it like would shut down at like 40% or something like that, just because it was trying to save the energy or whatever. So that happened to me a couple times on the iPhone 7. I think it went up to the iPhone 7, right? Like the issue. So like it happened a couple times. It didn't affect me too much. I think with a lot of these issues, and I try and say this without any bias, but if this was something like Samsung, you know, I would probably have the same response. And that is that, you know, like a lot of those things kind of blow up because of social media and stuff, like, or it just doesn't start right. Like someone says like, my phone is crashing or my phone is dead. Like, how can Apple do this? And then it just kind of is like a chain reaction. And I think Apple does just kind of get more flack because they're Apple, if that, you know, makes sense. But
well,
I think
bigger target, man. If you're a big target, you're easier to hit, right?
And I agree. Like, I think Apple handled it pretty well by saying like, look, we'll give you your money back. But I don't know, you can't really, like, if they had, you know, kind of said something when people were buying the phone that like they're going to be doing this after a year or two or whatever, then who knows, they may have gotten more flack then. But the other side of it, I think it goes back to like most people are upgrading their phones every 6 to 12 months, 18 months. I mean, I get a new phone. I'm on like a 24-month contract. So every like 2 years, I'll get a new phone. So that's usually when they start dying out anyway. You're looking to upgrade. I don't think it's too big of a deal, but that's kind of just my thoughts on it.
I would agree that the lifespan of most phones is 1.5 to 2 years.
Right.
And certainly at that point, most people should be considering a battery replacement. It's just that we're in this era now where that isn't as easy of an option as it used to be. Yeah. And I believe that the main issue here was not that Apple throttled the processing speed, but they weren't transparent about it at the beginning. And that's why people kind of got upset, because it certainly seemed as if they were slowing down the phone to encourage you to upgrade to a newer model. So that's where the real problem is, I think, for most people.
It's just how it starts, I think. Yeah, it's just how it's positioned. So if it had been more positioned as like, we're just trying to give it more life rather than just trying to get more money, it may have gone a different way.
Had they built the feature into the operating system that was sold with the phone, battery throttle on and off, no problem, right? But it was kind of, let's make our battery life last longer by just kind of slowing things down, whether that was a conscious decision or not, it didn't come across as a good move. We're getting short on time, and there was one that I definitely wanted to talk to you about, and it's on the list, and man, time always flies on these things. If we go 5 minutes extra, hopefully nobody nobody's schedule will be affected. But this is a big one, I think. Let's talk about the learning curve for someone who says, you know what, I'm kind of thinking, which we hear all the time, I'm kind of thinking about getting an iPhone now, or I'm kind of thinking about getting a MacBook or an iMac. How do we approach this? Well, I used to left click, now I got to right click. I used to sort by type, now I have to sort by kind. What are some good advice as to how to transition from one platform to another? And it doesn't necessarily have to be Windows to Apple, Windows to OS or OS. Any tips there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you've already got that new product and you're not looking to buy one, then definitely just reference the tutorials. I think there's so many out there, and if you are, if I can throw in a shameless plug, I have a course on like learning Mac basics. So if you're new to Mac or iPhone and iPad, there's a whole website. It's learnmacbasics.com. It's free. You can go download it.
Oh, perfect.
It's like there's like 30 videos, and I hate to do a shameless plug or whatever, but it's there.
Hey.
So I think tutorials are a great place to start. But honestly, yeah, I mean, I think you just gotta keep going with it. I mean, you'll get comfortable, and personally, I think iPhones and Macs are better to use for early adopters. I'm thinking more of like maybe the older generation, like I'm thinking my parents probably. Well, it's easier for them to get into iPhones and Macs, and I think once you've got it, it's easier to just keep learning, and you'll learn faster just watching tutorials and stuff like that. Does that answer your question, or like?
Yeah, no, that's great. Probably the simple answer there is there's a website for that, and it's my website. So by all means, you are here to promote yourself. There's no shame involved. If you have something that is legitimately useful for people, which is why we're talking, absolutely, man. We'll include that link in the bottom there. And despite a lot of my frustrations with Apple, I will say this, that if someone said, hey, my grandmother is 80 years old, she's never had a cell phone or a tablet.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? If you can make it happen, I'm going to hand her an Apple product every time, just based on, and honestly, I used to make fun of this, okay? Yeah. When the iPhone came out and started doing things that Palm had been doing for years, here's what they did. They said, you know what? You shouldn't have to be a rocket scientist to use your organizer or your phone or whatever your electronic device is. Let's make it simple. You've seen it at Burger King. They don't even, or McDonald's or any fast food restaurant you can think of. They don't trust their employees to put the right prices in. They put a picture of a burger, picture of fries, picture of a Coke. You press the button, you get what you clicked on, right? Yeah. On Palm, you pulled out your stylus, you open up your file manager, and people go, I'm going to throw this thing in the trash. Just give me a flip phone, right? So credit for ease of use, absolutely. Ergonomics. Again, they all leave something to be desired of, but if it was a 4-year-old or an 80-year-old, I think I'm always handing them an Apple device. That's the least amount of time you have to invest to learn something, right?
I think, yeah. And if just the last comment on that is like Apple does, to your point, does like simplify a lot of those processes. Like Android and other platforms are actually really solid. I mean, I'm not against the Pixel 2 or Samsung or any of those other brands. Like they're great products. And I think it just depends who it's for, like who's going to be using it and what you want to do with it. Like with, Android, for example, they give you a ton of customization over the way it looks and theming stuff and icons. But for someone who's not into that side of it might be more confusing than actually a feature, So I would recommend Apple just for those, less tech savvy people. But yeah.
Yeah, I will admit that, obviously I have to be familiar with both sides. I've got to do Android, I've got to do Apple stuff. And it keeps you on your toes, figuring out how to do the same task on different platforms. It's in time investment, but there's your answer. Lots of tutorials, videos, websites, including one that belongs to Luke that you can check out for that. We're getting towards the end, so I just want to run through and make sure we haven't missed any comments here. Let's see, if you watch Louis Rossmann do board repairs on Mac laptops and some of the work performed by Apple Authorized Repair Depots, the result is head shaking. I agree with that 100%, but that's not what we're really talking about, but it is a fair statement. And that happens with a lot of companies who have authorized repair centers.
Right.
They find the person they can pay the least amount of money, they teach them the basics, and then you turn over your car, phone, whatever to them.
Yeah,
could not disagree with you at all, Greg, on that one. Shaking head or wobbling from astonishment. What? Hey, Chang.
Yeah, I mean.
I saw that video. So they're talking about a repair video from Rossman's channel. Ergonomic doesn't correlate with being naturally intuitive. No, sir, it doesn't. But I was stating those as two separate things, not to be the same. So not to be confused. In any case, hey, everyone, I want to say thanks again for joining us for our weekly chat. We'll be back again on Thursday next week, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time as usual. Monday is a holiday, so this one is questionable as to whether we'll be doing the 2 p.m. Pretty sure we're going to, but if that changes, I will let you know. Luke, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, check out Luke's YouTube channel. I'll put those links as I get to work on this video afterwards.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. Thanks for coming, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm going to keep you on the line for just a second, Luke, and the broadcast, and then we'll wrap up. All right, guys, have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you next time.